Welcome to today's GC Advantage webinar. The topic today is the recipe for making a general counsel. And my name is Bob Barker, and thanks for joining us today. And you're in for a treat with Marla, Laura, and John. I'm sure they'll have a lot of fun and share a lot of great information. And just as a quick overview of the firm, so we help companies build, develop and optimize their legal and compliance team. And so we recruit general counsel, any lawyer that reports into the GC, as well as CCOs. And we also provide executive coaching, mentoring, as well as advising to help accelerate your success, within your organization. Today's, again, webinar is part of our GC Advantage program. It's our professional development program that we make available to everyone for corporate legal and compliance leaders. It really provides an opportunity to interact with folks like Marla, Laura, John, other GCs, CCOs, CEOs, board members, executive search consultants, and really to gain some insights to advance your career, as well as help support the growth and development of your company. Today's webinar is being recorded, and an email will be sent out to everyone once the material is available on our website, as well as we also have just a number of years of on-demand webinars. Includes the video recording, as well as podcasts, any of the slides that were available as well. So take advantage of that as well. We have some upcoming webinars in November. The topic is how to motivate, engage, and develop lawyers and staff in a hybrid or remote work environment. And so they'll talk about techniques to motivate the legal professionals and your staff to promote collaboration, team cohesion, in a remote and hybrid work environment. And then in December, we'll talk about the mastering the GC, CHRO, and CFO, triad, so to speak, for organizational excellence. And so obviously these three different roles, we'll talk about the expertise and the interests of the GC, CHRO, and CFO, and how they may complement as well as sometimes conflict with each other, but ultimately how to work effectively to accomplish the business objectives. Today, we look forward to getting your questions and answering them. So please submit your questions using the Zoom application. There's a Q&A icon probably at the bottom of your screen, depending upon which platform you're working on. And you'll also be able to see questions that have already been submitted. So if there is a question that you really have the same
Well, we have
Bob
frozen.
I was frozen.
So clearly, if you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A.
No.
And
You're locked up, Bob.
yeah, Bob, you keep freezing.
And
so maybe we should move on.
Okay. Well, let me turn it over to Marla.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Bob. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, 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 as John Oliver would say. Let's start. Laura, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Cengage and what is your role there? What do you do?
Oh, goodness. Big question. So I am Laura Stevens. I'm the General Counsel at Cengage. We are K-12 to workforce skill development education company, primarily digital. I have been there for a very long time, and I have seen this company through its print to digital transformation, which has been a really interesting thing to go through. And my role there is General Counsel, which can be so many different things on so many different days, and depending on where the business is, you know, brings a tremendous variety.
Thanks. So John, Bob told us about BarkerGilmore, but maybe you could share with everybody your specific role at BarkerGilmore.
For sure. So Bob manages most of the coaching and advising organization, and I manage the executive search component of the business. So we have an amazing team of search consultants and researchers, and a great team that just puts together. For some reason, they're able to find the perfect match every time for one of these searches. So I'm sure Laura's shaking her head because she's a satisfied customer as well. So my search.
Well, I will just give an unsolicited and undiscussed plug that I've both used your advisory services as well as your recruiting services, and I think the best testimony to your team in terms of, number one, they placed a critical role for me. Number two, the other critical role you had candidates for, and I had an internal referral, and your team said, no, she's the one to go with. And so I just feel like that is, I don't know what more of a mark of, you know, just kind of like wanting to get the right person in the right role. And obviously Marla has been my coach for quite some time now. And I couldn't be happier.
So
Well, that's a fantastic plug. We appreciate
Yes,
it. But
thank
our objective is always do what's right for our client and do what's right for the person that we're putting in the client. And we know it's working because our stick rate is a leader in the industry. So we're happy to do what's right for people.
I
and
think you sent me
always
like
works
4 resumes. I'm like, I'll hire any one of these people. Now we just need to figure out who is the best fit. And it was, none of them were, you know, out applying for jobs. You know, you kind of really have your finger on the pulse of, you know, people who are looking for their next step.
Well, you made it easy by offering a great opportunity, because we represent opportunities, not jobs, and that's what gets people, really good people, excited to come to work for people like you. So,
Yep, we got lucky.
all right, enough love.
Okay,
fest here.
enough of the, the
Love
hugs
fest,
and
yeah.
kisses. I'm Marla Persky. I'm the moderator today. I work with BarkerGilmore as an executive coach. And I was a general counsel in previous life. And in addition to doing coaching, I also sit on corporate boards. So today, when we talk about the recipe, and maybe we'll go to the next slide, when we go talk about the recipe for what it takes to make somebody a GC candidate, I'm going to be looking at it and talking about it from the point of view of the chair of the nominating governance committee, who does get involved in the selection of the GC. Ultimately, it is the CEO's job to pick the GC, but any smart CEO makes sure that they've run the candidates past certain members of the board of directors. So that's the point of view I'll be bringing today. So, Laura, when you became general counsel, what was your background and what was your experience?
I cannot believe it's been 5.5 years since I've been sitting as the GC. Time flies. My background was, I kind of grew up as an intellectual property attorney, was definitely attracted to like content type companies, which is where I'm at now. I was somebody who always just wanted to take on more. And I didn't realize that was progressing my career, but it definitely did. And to the point where I became a deputy general counsel, and I was the named successor for the GC who was currently in seat, who had a permanent, 2-year retirement he was going to have happen, which was never going to happen. There was a little bit of a shakeup in the executive team suite, and the GC role was open. And I actually went through a full interview process, in terms of with the board, the other ET members, etc., and got the role. which I was not terribly well prepared for, because I had only seen the things that I had seen. And Marla, you have worked with me to make sure that I'm developing people more holistically than I was developed. So my first, year was a little, so much new stuff. But I think there's a lot of different paths to get to a GC role. Mine was IP. Some folks are litigation, some folks are M&A. I mean, I don't know that there's like a prescriptive background.
Well, when I got my first GC role, it was at Baxter International, and I was promoted into the role. I had been there for maybe 17 years, I think, at the time. And I was an unexpected promotion because there was also a shakeup that wasn't planned. And I had a strong litigation background. And then I switched from litigation more to the business support side, quite honestly, because litigation in the drug and device space was just making me a very dark, dour person. And I needed to see something a little less, the man behind the elephant with the shovel kind of thing. And my second GC gig, I was hired into Boehringer as GC. And when I was hired into Boehringer, they knew that I had had international experience as well as the litigation and the M&A, and clearly a lot of, well, at that point, it was almost 20 years of experience in the drug and device side of things. So, John, you know my background and Laura's background, and you place people in GC roles. Would we have been candidates for you to look at for an external GC role?
Well, that is a great question, but I have an unfair advantage of knowing you two and your ability to influence others and your ability to earn trust. And one of the things Laura said is she was always willing to take on more. And I find one of my favorite interview questions is, how have your responsibilities progressed since you joined the organization? And when I hear someone say, I start in IP. Now, if she was an IP lawyer looking to be a general counsel, that would be a tough one. But by her willingness to always take on more and earn that trust, I imagine the people above, the CEO, the executive leadership team, and the board all had to see what she was made of, see what she was capable of, see how quickly she came up to speed on things. So as an internal candidate, you couldn't have done better. I mean, that was perfect. As an external candidate, not being a GC, that's a little bit tougher. Right now, the trend out there is CEOs and boards, they want people who've been there and done it as the GC. So first time roles are tough. So doing it right inside your company and moving up and earning that trust and taking on more and constantly stretching yourself, needless to say, that was a smart move. For you, Marla, getting that first GC at a major corporation like Baxter, again, your ability to influence and earn trust is second to none. Everyone who's ever worked with you comes back and says, it's a game-changing moment, that you're a career game changer because you bring so much value, because you say it like it is. You don't shy away from punches. You have what it takes. So once you earn that seat, like you earn that seat at Baxter, and you go out and you look at Boehringer, it doesn't surprise me that I guess the only thing I would say, they were darn lucky that they were able to recruit you away. I don't know all the circumstances, but you're at a major corporation like Baxter, and then to go to a non-US public company as the general counsel. I mean, that's an amazing move that you made, and obviously you brought them incredible value. But they were darn lucky to get you. So I would just say it doesn't surprise me. Your second role, your first role, you earned it, and once you have earned those stripes, the ability to maneuver between different opportunities, different companies, it's a lot easier. It's definitely a resume builder second to none to earn that GC seat. And then once you have it, the world is at your feet.
Let's go on to the next slide, because John said that, Laura and I both earned the chance to be promoted into the GC role. But even though it's tough to get your first GC role if you're not promoted up into it, it does happen, because otherwise it would just be like rearranging chairs on the Titanic, right? There has to be a new flow of never before GCs into the GC position. It might not be one of the Fortune 50 companies that will take a chance on a non-GC, but we put together this list of ingredients, and maybe John, you can take us through why you look for these things and how people who particularly have never been a GC can demonstrate this to you as a placement professional.
It's always what's not, everything you're listing here is what's not on the resume. These are things that either you have it or you don't have it. I always say it's what's not on the resume. What's on the resume gets you an opportunity to interview for the position. It's what's not on the resume that gets you the position. Of all these things, it's incredible how many times people overestimate their skill set in these areas. And like I say, being able to influence, being able to earn trust, how you communicate with people, it's those soft skills that really make a difference. And people are constantly coming and saying, do I need to have litigation experience or human resource experience, public company experience, whatever. And the thing about ingredients, it's funny that you invited me to this, and it's all about ingredients and baking, because I don't bake, but I cook. And when I cook, I rarely follow a recipe. I might look at a recipe, but I'm going to use a few ingredients, and then I'm going to make my own ingredients up. And I'll say there's no clear recipe that says you're going to be general counsel if you have these things. But everything you're listing here, Marla, these are the secret ingredient that always makes it taste amazing. And I'm not sure exactly what you want me to point out here, but let's just say these soft skills are things that it's easy to overestimate how good your skills are. But if you need, and this is not a pitch to go and hire one of our advisors, although our advisors do an amazing job in this area, but
I'll pitch that.
having someone outside of your circle who really can be candid with you and talk about your ability to communicate or your leadership skills, because we're talking about these internal promotions, and whenever we do a search, internal candidates are always considered compared to external candidates. And Laura and Marla, I'm sure your firms did the exact same thing. Laura just said they did a full search looking at external talent, and she won. But many times the internal candidates, they're considered, but at the same time they really haven't earned that trust and respect from the board and the leadership team. So while they're going through the process, they're not really going through the full process. So I just say having someone that can be as candid, and one of the things Laura said about having Marla as her coach is Marla just says it like it is. What did you say? She said if you're not a grown-up.
So the first few months of us working together were like this. I was like, Marla, I think I want to do this. And she was like, no. This is the thing to do. And I actually really appreciated somebody who had been in that seat, who had faced, it was changing litigation counsel on a major class action. And I was so afraid to do it. And you were like, no, change, do it. And it was the smartest thing. But like, it's not something I necessarily would have had the confidence to do on my own. I'd never been in that situation before. But hearing it from somebody who had sat in that seat, had done that before, and seen an outcome that was good, gave me the confidence to do it and saved us a ton of money. We got our dismissal, and I don't know who else could have given me that advice.
Well, I mean, it's lonely being general counsel because you don't have a lot of people to talk to. People come to you for the answers. So that's why I think going back to the ingredients, and again, I'm wearing my board of directors hat. I think the three most important things on this list that a director will look for in a general counsel candidate is communication skills, business skills, and creative problem solving. And so we have a couple of questions that I'd like to get to because I think it'll help elucidate this. One of the questions has to do with your internal, you're inside, you're taking on more and more responsibilities in-house, but you're not getting exposure to the right people higher up the food chain. What can you do to have light shined on what you're doing? Laura, this kind of fits right into what I know you're doing for the people who report to you to help them be your potential successors. Maybe you can comment on that.
I'm happy to, because that was the role I sat in. And so, John, yes, I definitely took on more and more, but I was not given the exposure. Like, my work was kind of taken and presented. I kind of wish if I could have gone back and said, how do I get, is there something I'm not doing, in terms of my manager? How do I get more exposure? I could have been more proactive. I was not as proactive as I should have been, hence name successor, but still a full search. Marla, when you said to me, like, you've done the legal stuff, you're a good GC. The mark of your, success is going to be making other GCs. And like, something about that really just resonated with me. So I am really passionate about providing full exposure, understanding where folks' gaps are, what they want experience in. And as lawyers, we want to take over, and so restraint is actually a really, it's something I've had to learn, let somebody else who's been hired for their expertise and needs to develop in certain areas, let them develop. And I will just say that I have not been I've been so impressed and not even a little bit disappointed in when I've really stepped back and allowed people to do their actual jobs.
Yeah, so not everybody gets to work for somebody like you, Laura, where you are not afraid to let somebody else step into the limelight and to shine light and to give them the exposure with the C-suite and the board. Not everybody has that kind of boss. So if you are, and I did not always have somebody who felt comfortable with their underlings being in the spotlight. So as an underling, it's better, I believe it is better to ask forgiveness than permission. So if you are really taking on additional tasks and putting yourself in harm's way of taking on stretch assignments, you need to publicize it. I believe everybody needs to be their own PR agent. And that doesn't mean you say, look at me, look at me, look at me. But it is talking factually about what you've accomplished and making sure through clear, concise communication that people know the role that you've played and the things that you've done. And as a former GC, I would never be happy with somebody on my team going behind my back and contacting a board member directly. But if they said to me, Marla, so-and-so you told me that so-and-so on the board was interested in X. Can I send them an update on this? Or I was talking to the CEO in the hallway and I mentioned why. I would want them to let me know after the fact that they talked to the CEO, so I wasn't surprised. But I would have been surprised, and I know I would not myself have gone to my GC and said, is it all right if I talk to so-and-so about X? hell no, I would just talk to so-and-so about X and then let the GC know about it. And this goes, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think that's right. So the thing that I say to my people all the time is, I hate being surprised. Like, surprise is not good. I want you to stretch, I want you to develop, I want you to do whatever, but I don't want to be surprised. I don't want to find out that there's a whole something going on that I'm unaware of. And so of these ingredients, transparency really just like is close to my heart, in that I try to be as transparent as I can with the people on my team, and I expect the same thing back. I was definitely in one of those situations as a deputy general counsel where there was no like, let's bring you on this call, let's introduce you to board members. And so I really just found little hooks to have meetings, substantive conversations with executive team members of things I was working on. And I think it actually developed a level of trust. I got to know them as people. And so when it came time for the full search to happen, I definitely had their backing.
So looking back on what you did before you got the GC opportunity, you said you were unprepared. Looking back, is there anything you wish you would have done? I know there are things you wish your boss would have done with you and for you. Putting that aside, because you can't control anybody else, you can only control yourself. Anything you wish you did to make you more prepared?
Definitely, and I see it in my team now. I mean, I definitely stuck to my swim lane. I was a commercial lawyer. I was, not an M&A lawyer by background, although now I have, half a decade of battle experience, litigation as well. I didn't probably reach out to colleagues as much as I should, to just sort of understand, to share experiences and understand kind of what was going on. I took on increasing responsibility, but mostly in my swim lane. I got very lucky because privacy became a very big thing in the course of, which was a great thing to get to know the business, to get to know data flows, et cetera, et cetera. It was very valuable. But I could have done more.
So, John, one of the things on this list is gravitas. Do you believe gravitas is tied to age and experience, or do you believe it is how one presents oneself?
I think it's exactly that, how they present themselves. Again, being able to influence, having a track record of developing others. We see very young GCs move up. When I see we track every GC move, and I watch GCs in their 40s. I watch GCs in their 60s take on new positions. But when I talk to the new GCs that are young, you speak to them and you finish up, you're just like, wow, that person's impressive. So again, I think the gravitas is incredibly important. If you can't come to the table and make an immediate impression on people, you're not going to get the job.
And the way people make impressions has to be authentic to themselves. There's not one right way of doing it. I think everything comes back to how one communicates. And you need to be able, I think people with strong gravitas communicate in a way that compel others to listen. So it's not necessarily by a loud voice. It's not by, tap dancing. It's knowing your value and adding your value at the right time.
Mm.
And it's also, I think the gravitas and the transparency and the sound, the business skills and the sound judgment is framing things for your business folks, right? They all kind of know a little bit about the legal, but they don't really. And so helping them frame and helping them enable decision-making is what builds the trust.
So if we could go to the next slide, please. I think it would be helpful to talk about more on how to prepare yourself. So Laura, we started talking with this with you about stretch assignments, building your brand and a solid reputation. If you could talk a couple minutes about your brand, building your brand, and John, I'd be interested in how you view brand as a differentiating factor for candidates.
Mhm. Are
My
you okay?
brand.
Are you asking me to jump in now or after Laura?
Let's let Laura go first, please.
My brand. I mean, I don't even know what my brand is. I do know this. I spend a lot of time and I try to be as patient as I can in bringing folks along. Right. So it's not me doing all the work behind some curtain and then saying, ta-da, here it is. I like feedback. I like iterative conversations. I like I said, sort of narrowing the field so folks can make good decisions, but they feel like they're part of the decision. I mean, after all, I work for a business, right? I mean, this is not a law firm. And so I think that is in me sort of innately to kind of just have the conversations. I feel like the more information I have, I used to hate when someone would send me like a page from something or a section from something. I'm like, no. I need the whole story. And for better or worse, we used to be in the office. Now it just means like picking up the phone or getting on a Zoom and having a conversation, because you can have 50 emails and all it does is frustrate the client. And I'm not getting the information I want. And people will say things live to you that they won't necessarily put in email for good reason. And building that brand, kind of like, I'm going to be responsive. I'm going to listen. I'm going to understand what you're saying your concerns are, because, I can bring your risk to zero. We just closed the business, right? And so, listening to their concerns helps me come up with more, better solutions. And it actually leads the way for stretch assignments, because once you sort of develop those trusting relationships and you sort of folks feel like you've listened and you understand and you're taking it in, they will just come to you. And that is really what happened. I mean, I think it's just, I think the interesting one is identifying translatable skills. Like, it's so hard to do that because you don't even know what the new skills are, which is why finding a coach was a fantastic thing, because I could just say whatever I wanted to say. You couldn't fire me, Marla. So I could just.
Skills is different than experience. Skills are translated from experience to experience to experience. John, I'd like to get back before we move on to your view of how does somebody brand themselves so that they stand out from the unwashed masses?
Well, yeah, first of all, I love that word reputation, because your brand isn't what you think it is, it's what others think it is. So reputation's the right word. What you think of yourself being your identity. I think you sized it up in the last slide where you said you need to be authentic. So how you build your brand is you need to be humble and you need to be authentic. If you're viewed as humble and authentic, people like you, you'll establish great relationships. You'll stay in touch with people you worked with years ago. I just prepped a woman for General Counsel role, and she's telling me that she worked at a big law firm 20 years ago before she moved in-house. Still meets today. They go on different trips together, and they enjoy being with one another. And she calls back to her partners from 20 years ago for different types of advice. And as she was speaking, you're just saying, this woman is authentic and humble and has relationships built all through her career. And all I can do is say her brand is based on being authentic, being humble, and building relationships. Now, we've talked about establishing trust and building relationships from the very start of this conversation. and the brand needs to be, and it's tough. I mean, look, you're trying to be humble. Most of these lawyers, they've always been the smartest person in the room, from high school to college to law school. It's not easy being humble. You're making more money than a lot of your friends. You're trusted to do very high stakes work, and you get people through it, and you make this win happen. You watch athletes celebrate after they score a touchdown. Lawyers are going to celebrate after they do something amazing for a company. But when all said and done, you have to stay humble. So, you know, you want people to tell you how great you're doing, but you can't. You have to resist the urge to tell others how great you're doing. You know, stand on your own merits. And I would say your brand being humble and authentic really makes a difference.
One thing that I think is responsive to that first question about, like, if you're not getting credit for the stretch assignments, something that I think is helpful is you either go to your HR, or you go to your boss and say you want to do a 360 review. Because you'll get feedback from stakeholders, you'll get, and I don't know, I mean, my company's fairly good at doing that. And you'll see stuff that you didn't expect to see, but perception is reality, right? And so it does help you figure out, you know, how others are perceiving you.
I say you have to walk a fine line there. I just finished the search, and the CEO, one of his comments about one of the internals was he's always looking for that kind of feedback and pat on the back for everything they do. And I think you have to resist a little bit. I mean, I do, Marla, believe that you need to make sure that it's recorded. You keep a record of your wins, but at the same time, you have to be careful about constantly looking for that pat on the back.
Definitely agree with that. I definitely,
Yeah.
I'm saying more as a diagnostic. Like,
Yeah.
if you haven't done it, it's a great thing to do, because the first time I did it, I was like, ooh, people notice that. Oh, I thought I had that under control, or I thought, like, it was very helpful. But I agree, like, soliciting feedback constantly is not helpful.
No.
But doing a stakeholder, it potentially gives you insight that you wouldn't otherwise have, because it's anonymous and blah blah blah. And I think it really depends on the company culture too.
So you both talked about the importance of being humble. And I'm talking about the importance of publicizing what you do, you know, because too many people think, well, if I do good work, I'm going to get ahead in my career. And sorry, that's not enough. It's sort of like the opening ante in a poker game. Yeah, you have to do good work, but people need to know you're doing good work. How do you balance publicizing what you do, especially in our remote environment today, with not sounding like you're a braggart and being humble? I stumped the audience.
I have found through your tutelage, Marla, that putting my people out there actually is like my best asset. You know, the fact that folks feel like they can depend on my team, and I have a solid, strong team, has been helpful, really helpful, because I'm not going to have the answer to everything at a moment's whatever. And I also think another thing to not be afraid of is saying, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. So that people trust, you know, kind of that you're coming back with an informed opinion, as opposed to trying to just on the spot answer something that I don't know the answer to. I think showing a strong team, making sure you have the right answer and not just need to be a know-it-all off the cuff, it engenders trust.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to argue with results, right? First, you need to deliver results, and publicizing the results, but recognizing that nobody does it alone. There's always a team around you, whether it's people who report to you or people who are in other functions that you worked with. It's celebrating and publicizing successes and achievements, but giving credit where credit is due as well. I think that's how you publicize it. In a remote environment, it is much tougher. And I think that for those who are able to travel, it's important to have your face physically in front of people, not just on Zoom on occasion. And it's also important that in a remote environment, you still are building relationships, because it is possible to build relationships. I coach people who I will never meet face to face, but I have strong relationships with them. You can build them remotely. And I used to build them before there was such a thing as Zoom, just by being honest and open and asking questions. I think one way that it's very important to publicize what you've accomplished in a remote environment is using things like blog. It's not always just inside the company. People should have LinkedIn profiles and talk about, the team and I just did X at so and so. Hashtag Laura Steve or at Laura Stevens at John Gilmore, and then they're going to hear it on their LinkedIn profile that I called out to them. Those are ways in a remote environment. Use the tools that your company has. If you have a Slack channel or whatever it is, make sure you're using those to communicate widely with people. John, there's a question that came in, and this I think is right up your alley.
One thing, Marla, because
Sure.
I do think like taking on stretch assignments, they're not for you to sit back and wait for them to be handed to you.
Yeah.
I think that be opportunistic. Like I founded our privacy office. I had no business doing that. I mean, but I did it, and I founded our compliance function, which is now up and running. We're now looking at an enterprise risk management function. Like, look for the gaps. Those are your opportunities. And if you're waiting for somebody to hand them to you and say, and that actually really helps like build the brand. You're proactive. You're looking for what the business is going to need, not this 6 months, but over the next 18 months. And so I take on stretch assignments feels like you're waiting for somebody to sort of hand them to you, and they almost never do.
Right.
All right, sorry.
No, that's fine. So John, one of the questions that came in was, job descriptions. Job descriptions are looking for a combination of, Jesus, Abraham, Muhammad, and Buddha, right? So if somebody is really only Jesus and Muhammad, should they apply? Should they throw their hat in the ring?
I 100%. And I think that is one of those questions that you need to have the confidence to go in, and it's how you're able to click. I mean, is the chemistry right? This is the dating game. You go in and you tell who you are and what you're all about, and you might miss something here or there. I hit literally, I'm doing back-to-back Zooms all day as I always do, and I just had someone complaining that they watched somebody else get a job that they thought they should have gotten, and they were disappointed to see that the person who received the job had 1 out of the 4 things, and this candidate had 3 out of the 4 things, and she didn't get the job, and she was very upset about it. And the bottom line is, somebody goes in and meets the CEO or the board or somebody, and they let their hair down, and they just let people get to know who they are. Where are they from? How did they get there? What do they think about every day when they're doing a good job? What's their family like? I mean, all the questions that you can't be asked on an interview, if you're just you allow yourself to open up a little bit, and they say, wow, this person's amazing. I just met a candidate yesterday that tells me he skipped a couple of grades because he was advanced and he wasn't bragging about it, but he then was very young going to college, and because of his work ethic and doing the homework and things like that till late in the evening, he was able to find law school to be easy. He went to Georgetown law school was easy. So, I'm just saying, I'm meeting this person and I'm impressed by this person because of the work ethic and things like that. So he might not have everything that I'm looking for, but he as a person, I found very attractive. And so I would just say this: you need to apply, but it's who you are more important than anything. And being able to let them know who you are, that ultimately gets that position. And you can't look at the person that got the job and said that person didn't have M&A, they didn't have public company experience. Why are they getting this job over me? Again, they did a better job connecting with that leadership team, and that's more important.
Encouraging.
Right.
that.
Let's
As
go to the
somebody-
next slide, because I think this talks about this in the first one. It's blending EQ with IQ. You can be the smartest person in the room and people will hate you for it, right? So it's in how you, again, going back to gravitas, how you present yourself. And this also, Laura, for you, one of the questions that came in, I think, is right on point, because you and I talked about this several times, and that is how to meet the CEO's expectation that their GC will be not just a good lawyer, but a business strategist and a consigliere, not just in the legal area, but in the business overall. Maybe you can share with our audience how it is you gained the trust of your CEO and how you demonstrated to him the value you add to the business as a whole, not just as the lead lawyer.
So it's such a good question. The other thing I was just going to say is don't be intimidated by job descriptions. I mean, you'd have to be 250 years old to have most of the experience that is in any job description. It's a wish list, right? And I think you're totally right, John, that, you have to have some coverage, but it ultimately comes down to the right fit. It just does. So I was told, like, you need to be kind of the whispering in the ear of the CEO, and the CEO needs to be hand in hand with you. And I think it's one of the challenges of growing up in a company and then suddenly being the GC and reporting to somebody who was your boss's boss before. And we meet regularly, and I used to walk him through the list of things he did not care about, right? I mean, there were things I cared about, but his assumption was you got this, right? That's why you have this job. So please stop telling me about the things that I don't really need to know about. And so probably took me a couple of years in to sort of say, what is useful for you? I want to start talking about what's on your mind. Tell me what, and it was a game changer in terms of the stuff that would come out of his mouth, what he was thinking about the business, what he was thinking about in terms of, things that concerned him. We stopped talking about, well, this litigation is this, and this is this, because I don't wait for our one-on-ones to give him that information. I just give it to him, right? And so kind of flipping the script a little bit and sort of saying, tell me let's talk about what's on your mind. And it just has engendered just very, very open, unstructured conversations. When we need a structured conversation, we have one. But just I think it's the same thing you said, John, just getting to know the person, which was never going to happen with a to-do list, he has given me some of the best feedback on, I will run things by him before I'm kind of thinking this. He's like, I actually don't think you should do that. I think you should do this. It's been incredibly helpful, and it has definitely built a very open and comfortable relationship.
So one of the things that I found that lawyers have the ability to do, but don't always do, is to listen to what the entire conversation is, not to listen for the legal issues, not to listen for the opportunity to make their point, but to listen to what is being said and not being said, and then asking questions to help elucidate the issue or to make an observation that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with law. This is not the best example, but it's the only one that comes to mind right now. I was sitting in a C-suite meeting where we were talking about succession planning for all the C-suite roles. And I was relatively new. This was to Boehringer. I was relatively new there. And everybody was talking, I mean, all the different business CEO heads were talking about their successors, and the enabling function heads were talking about their successors. And what struck me was that every single person they were talking to was an older white man. And I just said, you know, not to criticize anybody, but we're talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion. And this was before ESG was even on anybody's radar screen, but diversity and inclusion was. I said, we're talking about wanting to be diverse and wanting to be inclusive. But when I take a look at everybody's succession plan, there is no diversity, there is no inclusion. Can we take a step level down and take a look at the hidden talent in the organization and start talking about that? Well, you know, that was a big kerfuffle. But afterwards, the CEO came to me and said, I'm so glad you said that. I didn't even see it. It didn't even come to me. So I realized that one of the value adds I could bring to any discussion was just stepping back and not being emotionally attached to what was being discussed, but to listen to what was and wasn't being said and taking an outsider's in view of what's going on. Because anybody who works at a company knows we get very involved in navel gazing. What's going on in our company? And to be able to pick your head up and look outside your office, the four walls of your company, is of great value. And that's what
I think as a lawyer, you're like uniquely positioned in that way, right? Like if I only spoke about legal things, I would never speak during an executive team meeting. I am the one who has so little to risk. So I'll just say whatever I'm thinking. Like if I feel like the team is not gelling, I'm like, something's in the air. What's in the air? You know, or like as the lawyer, you know, you serve the whole company. So it is, I think it's kind of like an unspoken value that a GC can bring to a company, which is that you've got no vested interest in any of the stuff, right? Like you are there for the team. To your point, saying like, hello, you know, let's take a look around. Who else is going to say that?
Right. So John, when you're looking to fill a role at the GC level, how important is industry experience? And for those who may have some industry experience, but at a smaller company, how important is it that they are able to express a wider expanse of experience in the industry? Or does that even matter?
It depends on the industry. So obviously, if it's healthcare, they want healthcare. If it's financial services, they want financial services. But if it's something in consumer products or energy or industrial, or I mean, there's many different industry sectors, entertainment. I watch people move all over from one to the next. But if it's something that's coming from a highly regulated industry, like I said, financial services, healthcare, it's hard to work around that. The CEO and the board, they want someone who's sat there and has had that experience. I really am surprised that somebody's getting hired completely unrelated experience. That said, they could. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's no stereotypes here that it's always a certain way, but it is highly unlikely in the highly regulated industries that people will just bounce from one industry to the next. I mean, that's my experience, but I do like the idea if somebody's going to have one industry experience, they're a little bit limited in that one industry. I like the idea to take on a stretch assignment or move to a different industry and be able to show you're mastering that. And we've seen plenty of people, like you're a good example in the pharma business. You're in the pharma business, you get recruited by another pharma company. So I mean, it's needless to say, you have a better shot if you have that industry experience. If you have diverse industry experience, that impresses people because it shows that you're able to go into different industries, show what you're able to do, and that you're able to take on new assignments with ease. So I'd say it's advantageous to have multiple industry experience, but it's also, when you're interviewing, it's advantageous to have the industry experience of the company you're applying to.
But this also goes back, I think, to translatable skills. So I was in the Baxter's was not a pharmaceutical company, really. It was a device and a biologics company. And I went from a device and a biologics company to a pharmaceutical company. Now, it's in the broader healthcare array, but the person who was my successor did not have that level of, had a totally different industry experience, was never in healthcare. And however, she did have regulated industry experience, not FDA, not healthcare. So it's translatable experience. It's, the ability to sell shoes is easier, and you don't have government on top of you the way it is in the healthcare arena or in the financial services or energy, for that matter. But to be able to talk about, I understand regulated industries and what it takes. If you're in a consumer facing industry, B2C versus B2B, can you talk about those differences? It's translatable skills, because anybody can learn the specifics. You have to be able to issue spot, and issue spot does not necessarily require deep experience, because nobody is an expert in everything. You just need to issue spot and then figure out who is the expert to come in and ask the question.
You taught me that.
So Laura, a lot of what happens with regard to being a lawyer is preventing the bad from happening, mitigating risk. For those people who are really successful in avoiding the boogeyman under the bed, how do they demonstrate their successes? Because you're proving a negative, basically.
I mean, that is just one of the biggest challenges, like the risk that we've averted. Right. And it is a challenge. I mean, I'm just going to say that is a challenge. I do think connecting the risks that you are mitigating to the business leaders whose risks they are is incredibly helpful. And having the conversation around what you're doing, why you're doing, how you're doing, it's something that if you just kind of just do behind the scenes, they'll just assume that that's how it goes. I do think conversations around sort of like, here's what's going on, here are the options, here's what I'm going to help, here's what I suggest, like the decision empowerment, just creates an awareness that I think, why would any business person have it?
So one last question for you, John, and then we will do a quick wrap up, is when you're looking to place somebody in a GC role, do they need direct management experience, i.e. having direct reports into them? Or if they are able to demonstrate that they've led teams and projects without direct reports, is that okay?
I mean, again, it's all everything's possible. So I'm not saying anything's not possible. The person that has a proven history of making, building a diverse team, developing that team, very low attrition rate because people really feel engaged and they want to be part of that team, they're going to have an advantage. But still, somebody that's been, non-direct report but responsible for a project, they have that. So they have the opportunity to get that. There's so many variables here that gets into what makes someone a special, great candidate. I would just say this: one thing that we face regularly is people. If it's a first time general counsel opportunity for you, you have to be willing to take some risk. Maybe it's the risk of relocation. Oh, I don't want to relocate. I have my family here. Or maybe it's going to a PE portco that pays less cash but has bigger upside potential on the back. But I really don't want to take the risk of taking less cash. There has to be a risk involved taking something new. You have to make a calculated risk. But I say GCs that are afraid of taking risk shouldn't be GCs, right? So if you're a person that can't deal with risk, you shouldn't be a GC. End of story. Being a first-time GC today in this market is not an easy task. Being a first-time GC that can't bring anything to the table extra, like diversity or broad experience or perfect industry experience or any of these other things that we're talking, perfect leadership experience, you have to be willing to take a bit of a risk. And a lot of people we talk to say no to a perfect opportunity that could bring them a lot of value down the road, but they're not willing to take the risk. I'm saying first-time GCs, do what's right inside your company to get there that way. If you can't get there because your GC today is not going anywhere for the next 10 or 20 years, you're going to have to think about going outside, and it's going to involve some sort of risk. So get comfortable with it.
So maybe we could jump to slide 11 because that goes to.
And we do. Bob actually had to run to a client call.
Right.
So
yes.
we're responsible for closing shop. So we'll let you close up right here.
Right. So the way I would like to close is by asking both Laura and John for the one piece of takeaway information you hope that the listeners will walk away from this webinar with. I mean, John, I think maybe what I heard you say, which is critical, is no fear. You have to be able to not be afraid to take a chance, not be afraid to offer an opinion, not be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that that's your one takeaway for the audience?
I would say that, and again, I point back to the respect I give Laura is continuous learning, always raise your hand, take on greater responsibilities. Don't wait for it to come to you. You have to go after it. And I know everybody hears that and people are saying, I just don't have the chance in my organization. If you earn the trust of others, you'll have the chance.
Laura, what's your one takeaway?
You're never ready to be a GC. You're never ready. I mean, you're ready once you've been in the job 2 years. I mean, I think it's interesting, John, that you say like it's hard to get a first-time GC job, but like only a GC can be a GC, right? So I think being intimidated by job descriptions or feeling like you don't have full coverage of legal areas of expertise, like those should not be your stumbling blocks. I think being self-promoting in terms of gaining experience in your company, the best place to do it is where you're at. And then when you feel like you've outgrown it, it's time to leave, especially if your GC is not going anywhere, and it takes some risk. But the only way you can get a GC job is by getting a GC job. And so the best thing you can do is just put yourself out there.
All right, let's maybe go to the last slide. My one takeaway that I hope our audience members can keep in mind is something we haven't talked about, and that is networking, because it is critical to getting recognized for what you do, to hearing about opportunities, to have people know what you're capable of. by networking both internally to where you are today in your company and networking with external audiences, not just with search professionals, because many people get their jobs because a friend hears of something and thinks of you. And the only reason why they think of you is because you're networking. And that also helps you get broader industry knowledge and experience, because networking is a two-way street where you're asking questions and learning things from people, as well as giving them information about you. And so giving them information, we're giving you information about BarkerGilmore, if we can help you. John is, I hate to say anything nice about him because then he gets a swell head, but
My
John
big
is
ego.
excellent at finding the right person for the right job. Laura is a wonderful promoter of other people. And BarkerGilmore is a great place to go if you think you need that extra little oomph to help you in your career, and including surrounding yourself with the best possible talent. So
Completely.
thank you
And
all.
I'll point to Marla and say what Laura told us at the beginning before this started is her ability to serve as a strategic business partner and an amazing general counsel leapfrogged after hiring Marla. So
100%.
having a good quality coach that you trust and build this relationship with, worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. We look forward to seeing you next month.